Thank you. We move to First Minister's questions, and at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I begin by paying tribute to Christina McKelvie, a respected colleague and a dedicated public servant. And my thoughts and those of my party are with her family, her friends and colleagues. And I know that her passing this morning at the age of 57 will be difficult for many here today. And I note that you have indicated that members will, quite rightly, have an opportunity to pay full tribute to Christina in due course. I intend to ask the First Minister about an Audit Scotland report which was published today and which lays bare serious problems with GP care in Scotland. The report makes explicit multiple recommendations, including 5 that should be completed by the Scottish Government within a year. So will the First Minister guarantee that he will deliver on the report's recommendations?
First Minister.
President Officer, first of all, may I thank Russell Finlay for his kind remarks about my dear colleague Christina McKelvie and appreciate his condolences to all on this sad news. In relation to the question of the Audit Scotland report, obviously the Audit Scotland report contains some recommendations that the Government will consider. We are taking forward a series of investments to strengthen the access to healthcare within Scotland, and general practice is one of the areas where that access is at its most critical, and the Government's investment through, for example, the Primary Care Improvement Fund and other steps that have been taken to expand the workforce within general practice are part of the practical steps that we're taking to address the issues in the Audit Scotland report.
Russell Finlay.
These commitments should be delivered so that patients can get a face-to-face GP appointment when they need one. The Independent Auditor General's report states that the Government has not met previous pledges which should have been delivered by 2021. And his report calls for, and I quote, a clear delivery plan for general practice by the end of 2025 that includes specific actions, timescales and costs. So can the First Minister confirm that he will bring forward this plan by the end of the year for the benefit of patients across Scotland?
First Minister.
So, as I set out in my speech on the National Health Service in late January, there are a number of different interventions the Government is going to take to improve access to healthcare services, and right at the heart, as I said in my first answer, will be access to GP services. And the Government has set out our intention to explain the specific interventions that we will make in that respect, and that information will be shared publicly very soon. Now, of course, we start from a high platform here, in the sense that Scotland has the highest number of GPs per head of population in the United Kingdom. We are determined to build on that. We are also determined to expand the workforce within general practice. So, for example, we have employed over 3,500 whole-time equivalent staff in other primary care teams, which are designed to ensure that we boost access to healthcare. And we've also employed an additional 1,300 whole-time equivalent staff to support general practice through health boards. So these issues, which I accept are important about the manner in which we, members of the public, are able to access general practice, are being responded to by the investments that the Government is making.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Another publication released today by Healthcare Improvement Scotland details serious concerns at A&E units in Greater Glasgow. These problems are consistent with what's happening at hospital emergency departments across Scotland. The regulator says that it has become routine for ambulances to queue up outside Queen Elizabeth University Hospital and for patients to be treated in corridors. And the HIS report says that patient safety is being, and I quote, seriously compromised. So does the First Minister agree that it's unacceptable, and explain what steps he will take to put patient safety first?
First Minister.
Patient safety is an absolutely fundamental prerequisite of our healthcare system, and the report from Healthcare Improvement Scotland was designed to address the legitimate concerns raised by representatives of the staff in the emergency departments of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and I expect the board to implement and address the findings of the Healthcare Improvement Scotland report. And indeed, I'm confident that the board will do so. There has been an entire change of leadership in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, with a new chair, new chief executive, new medical director in place in the board, taking forward, as the chief executive of the Health Board has made clear publicly, at pace and at scale, the reforms necessary. On the wider question, I understand the concern about access to accident and emergency services, but what I would reassure members of the public about is that we have been seeing for some weeks improvements in the performance of A&E units against the 4-hour standard, and that has been improving over a number of weeks as we recover from the significant disruption that was felt as a consequence of the flu outbreak which dominated over the Christmas New Year period and well into January. So I think we are seeing a strengthening position within A&E. And, of course, on the substance of Russell Finlay's question about Healthcare Improvement Scotland, I expect those recommendations to be addressed by the board.
So Finlay.
Thank you. For its report, Healthcare Improvement Scotland surveyed NHS doctors and nurses working in 3 separate hospitals. And shockingly, the majority of those surveyed said that patients rarely receive care that is either appropriate or timely. And the report makes a number of suggestions to NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, but it also makes 4 national recommendations to the Scottish Government. The report advises the Government to define new standards and introduce new guidance to improve the quality and safety of patient care. And these are sensible suggestions that could improve patient experiences and reduce NHS Scotland waiting times. So will John Swinney take the necessary and decisive action to make these changes, and if so, by when?
First Minister.
These are urgent priorities for me, Presiding Officer, because they get to the heart of what I think is the key issue that is affecting the performance of our healthcare system in a number of respects, which is the ability for us to manage flow within healthcare settings. So if a hospital is at full occupancy, for example, it is difficult for staff in an emergency department to admit individuals into hospitals if the hospital is congested. Now, what we are working to ensure, and then obviously if hospitals are congested because we don't have enough social care provision within the community, then that means that we will have delayed discharges within our hospitals. So there's an integrated link between emergency departments, hospital occupancy and delayed discharge. And I assure Mr Finlay that all 3 of these elements of the flow within the healthcare system are priorities for the Health Secretary and I as we undertake weekly scrutiny of the performance of the health system and the work to reduce waiting times. And it will also be strengthened by the point that Mr Finlay made to me in his first question, which is about strengthening access to general practice, so that at the earliest possible opportunity, individuals with healthcare requirements can get the appropriate treatment and support. And of course, there is a wide variety of treatments and support available through pharmacies, through general practice and through other allied health professionals to whom we wish to improve access.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, I'm so sorry at the passing of Christina McKelvie, and I know her pain will be felt most deeply in the SNP, but it will be felt across the Parliament. And my thoughts and the thoughts of the entire Scottish Labour Party are with Keith Brown, Christina's wider family, friends and all her colleagues across this Parliament. She was a dedicated local MSP, and her campaigning on women's health, particularly as she battled breast cancer herself, brought into the public eye many of the issues that are too often ignored. Yes, she was fierce politically at times, but she was also great fun. And across this chamber, and I assure you across all parties, many have lost a friend, and our deepest condolences go to all her family, friends and colleagues at this difficult time. The Chamber will know of my long-standing concerns about the leadership and culture at NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and today's Health Improvement Scotland report into emergency departments across Greater Glasgow is devastating. Corridor care normalised, frontline A&E staff's repeated concerns ignored, worse still, staff bullied and silenced, and patient care compromised, often with devastating consequences. Does John Swinney think this is acceptable?
First Minister.
First of all, President Officer, may I thank Anna Sarwar for the generous remarks that he has made, and I appreciate the words that he's expressed about our dear colleague. In relation to the Healthcare Improvement Scotland report on Greater Glasgow and Clyde, I don't think that the practice that Mr Salwar recounts is acceptable. That's why Healthcare Improvement Scotland have responded to the concerns that have been expressed by the clinicians. In relation to I acknowledge the sustained questioning that Mr Salwar has led on the leadership of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. As he will know, there is new leadership in place that is addressing and committed to addressing all of these questions that are raised in the report. And indeed, Professor Jan Gardner, the new Chief Executive of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, has indicated publicly the commitment she has to addressing those recommendations with pace and at scale to ensure that the issues are properly addressed.
Anna Sarwar.
I've been raising concerns for years with successive SNP Health Secretaries and First Ministers, but here we are again. This is just the latest report after 29 doctors raised concerns almost 2 years ago, and it exposes serious issues around the culture of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. But it follows the same pattern: patient safety compromised, staff ignored, bullied and silenced, and when they blow the whistle, the management deny their claims, intimidate them and attempt a cover-up. Staff describe the working environment as brutal and inhumane. They talk of moral distress or being haunted by some patient experiences leading to harm, and they say it's a constant battle to keep patients and staff safe and that there is no support from management. After years of warnings and hollow claims of lessons learnt, why is this SNP government allowing this rotten and at times fatal culture to continue?
First Minister.
Well, we don't accept it is in any way to be acceptable or to be resigned to. That's why Healthcare Improvement Scotland went in and undertook the investigation that they undertook, and it's why the leadership of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde are saying today that those issues will be addressed, and they'll be addressed with pace and urgency. And let me use this platform to make it abundantly clear to every health board in the country that the culture that is referred to by Healthcare Improvement Scotland is completely and utterly unacceptable. Now, Scotland has a formidable record in general on improvements in patient safety. Indeed, our patient safety programme is very highly regarded internationally because of the work that it involves. However, the quality and strength of that patient safety programme will be undermined if there isn't a culture of acceptance of the need to tackle the behaviour that the Healthcare Improvement Scotland report highlights. So Mr Salwar has my assurance that in my communication and that of the Health Secretary to health boards, the contents of that report are unacceptable and they must be addressed by health boards around the country.
Anna Sarwar.
The problem is that patients and staff have heard this before and the culture continues, because this report highlights the unacceptable normalisation of corridor care and patients stuck in ambulances outside A&E. 2/3 of staff surveyed felt patients rarely or never received appropriate and timely care. But for years, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has been plagued by issues, often with deadly consequences. The most stark is the infection scandal that cost lives. And at every turn, patients, parents and staff have fought for answers but been frustrated by a rotten culture of cover-up. A public inquiry was agreed in 2019. The culture continues. The board was put into special measures. The culture continues. The first NHS board in Scotland to be investigated for corporate homicide. The culture continues. And as this latest report shows, patients are still being put at risk by a failing health board that's been empowered time and time again by this SNP government. It appears this SNP government is more interested in protecting managers and institutions rather than protecting patients and staff. So what will it take for that to change?
First Minister.
So I don't accept that characterisation of the approach of the government, because if that was the case, there would not be an inquiry into the Scottish Hospital's performance, and there would not have been a Healthcare Improvement Scotland analysis of Greater Glasgow and Clyde. So those are two examples where this government has been prepared to honestly confront real and acute difficulties within our health service. And I would expect that to be the case. And I give Mr Sarwar and Parliament the assurance that that will always be the case under my leadership. We will confront difficulties. We'll confront them openly and honestly to improve the experience of patients. Now, Mr Sarwar said that there was a normalisation of corridor care. Let me make it clear to Parliament, I don't accept that. I will not tolerate that. I will not normalise corridor care. I don't think it's a good idea to have corridor care. So what we have to do is address some of the issues I referred to in my last answer to Russell Finlay of improving the flow of patients through hospitals so we avoid corridor care. Mr Sarwar also said that patients are routinely denied appropriate and timely care. That's not. I accept there will be failings in the health service, but I don't think that is a fair characterisation of the National Health Service, because I think many people experience formidably high-quality, professional, loving care from within the National Health Service, and I want to make sure that's the experience of everybody.
Question number 3, Patrick Harvey.
This Parliament has lost one of our very best today. And I want to offer my deepest sympathies and those of my party to everyone who knew and loved Christina McKelvie. Today is a moment of pain and sadness, but Christina's life and her extraordinary spirit deserve to be celebrated as well. In her first speech, she said she would rather be a citizen of a nation that looks to persuade and cooperate than bully and cajole. Now, she might have been talking about Scotland as a nation, but I think those words also captured the kind of person she was and the kind of politician she was. Lots of people in politics start out with those kind of values and ideals. Christina was someone who held fast to them. Compassion and kindness were at her core. As Christina's partner and our colleague Keith Brown said today, she lit up every room she was in. And I think that was certainly true of this room, our Parliament. She brightened it in every sense. The only question I would like to ask the First Minister today is, how does he think we can all bring that kindness and compassion into our work as Christina did?
First Minister.
I'm very grateful to Patrick Harvey for his kind words and all that he has said about Christina McKelvie, which I entirely endorse. And I think it's at moments like this that some of the conflict that goes on in this Parliament and in politics in general and in the wider political debate is put into sharp relief by the points that Patrick Harvey puts to me today. Now, I am no shrinking violet when it comes to defending my position and promoting the position of the government. So I'm not going to say I'm perfect and everybody else is at fault, because that would just not be the way it is. But I do think there are lessons to be learnt from the magnificent generosity of spirit of Christina McKelvie, who, despite the fact that she might have defended the government's position vigorously here, from this place, or my party's position from the backbenches when she was on the backbenches, but she would also wander out of the chamber with warmth and affection. And if anyone was facing a moment of difficulty, the first person at your side would be Christina McKelvie. So perhaps we could all maybe take this moment to rebalance and recalibrate how we act and react in our politics, reminded by the astonishing example of Christina McKelvie.
Thank you. Question number 4, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I wish to convey my profound sadness at the untimely death of our brave and much-loved colleague, Christina McKelvie, sending heartfelt condolences to Keith and her family. She was truly a force of nature. To ask the First Minister what his response is to the UK Government's 2025 Spring Statement.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Government is concerned by a number of details within the UK Government's Spring Statement, not least of which the assessment which has emerged from the Department for Work and Pensions, that the measures contained in the Spring Statement are likely to drive 250,000 more people into relative poverty, including 50,000 children. Those cuts to welfare have a direct impact on Scotland's budget. The Fraser-Vallender Institute has estimated that it will see a block grant adjustment to our budget that removes £455 million in 29-30.
Ms Gibson.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. Since Labour came to power, we have seen a shameful litany of broken manifesto promises, from rising household energy bills and denial of justice for WASPy women to imposing benefit cuts on disabled people and slashing public services. It's hardly surprising that long-standing Labour members have resigned, denouncing its betrayal of their own voters. Will the First Minister confirm that while Labour's Holyrood branch office meekly and embarrassingly chooses a policy of omerta in the face of UK Labour cuts, this SNP government will always stand up for the most vulnerable people in our communities?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has legislated, for example, where we've acquired new powers on social security, to implement a social security system that's based on dignity and respect, and that will always be the approach that we take. We legislated for that to ensure that was the approach that was taken in the future. So Mr Gibson has my assurance that those values will always be at the heart of the decisions that are taken by the Scottish Government. I want to make sure that we put our focus into the necessary work to eradicate child poverty. That will become more challenging as a consequence of the Spring Statement, because we are once again, as we found with the last Conservative Government, swimming against a tide of rising poverty levels as a consequence of UK Government decision-making. Our data in Scotland released today demonstrates that we are seeing reducing levels of child poverty in Scotland, but that pattern will be challenged by the prevailing decisions that have been taken by the Spring Statement.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I add my expression of sympathy and condolence to the family and friends of Christina McKelvie, and particularly to our colleague Keith Brown. Presiding Officer, OBR forecasts released yesterday revealed that by the end of the decade, tax receipts from North Sea oil and gas will slump from £5.4 billion to just £2.3 billion as a result of declining production. First Minister, how can this be described as a just transition?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I've been sort of listening to lots of debate over many years, including certainly during the 2014 referendum, that indicated that oil revenues were not going to be a source of strength for Scotland in the future. I think what Mr Hoy is alighting on is the challenges that exist as a consequence of a declining oil basin. We have to adjust to that. We have to put in place the measures to tackle those issues, and that's what the Government is doing.
Question number 5, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to reduce waiting times for children and adolescents for the diagnosis of autism and ADHD.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, long waits for support are unacceptable, which is why we are working closely with health boards and local authorities to ensure they are tackled. As part of this work, we have allocated £123 million to health boards this year to support improvements across a range of mental health services, including neurodevelopmental services.
Murdo Fraser.
I thank the First Minister for his response. As I am sure he is aware, last week NHS Tayside announced it would no longer accept referrals for diagnosis for autism and ADHD from children or adolescents unless they have other mental health conditions, a decision that the National Autistic Society have described as beyond comprehension. Elsewhere in Scotland, we see similar issues with long waiting times of 5 years or more, arising from a severe shortage of qualified professionals and therefore an inability for health services to meet the rising level of demand. So what action is the Scottish Government taking to address the concerns of many young people and their parents that they will not now be able to access the help they desperately need?
First Minister.
Sir, I have considerable sympathy with the points that Mr Fraser has put forward, and I'm very concerned by the manner in which the proposals that have been set out by NHS Tayside have been communicated, because I acknowledge that they are likely to have caused alarm. Indeed, I see it in my own inbox as the Member of Parliament for Perthshire North. So I accept that these proposals have not been well communicated. I think what NHS Tayside is trying to do is trying to recognise that there is early intervention support that can be available within the community that can assist young people who are presenting with mental wellbeing challenges, which, if we do that, will eventually reduce pressure on the CAMS service, so the CAMS service can be focused on those children with the more acute clinical requirement for that support. That's what is proposed. I don't think that's been particularly well communicated to members of the public. So what I give Mr Fraser the assurance about is that the Health Secretary is working very closely with NHS Tayside and with other boards to ensure that the model that I've just explained to Parliament is the one that people feel and experience, because I think it does stand it has the potential to better meet the needs of young people in Scotland. And for reassurance, can I say to Mr Fraser and to Parliament that for the first time ever, national performance against the 18-week CAMS standard has been met, with 90.6% of children and young people starting treatment within 18 weeks of referral. Now, that is progress because we have increased CAMS staffing levels by 63% in the last decade. But if we are truly to meet the challenging presentations of mental well-being that young people are experiencing today, which I think has been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic and by other factors in our society, we have to put in place the earlier intervention services which were somewhat missing from the NHS Tayside announcement.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This is a difficult day for us all, and my heartfelt condolences to our dear friend and colleague Keith Brown, MSP, and also to Christina's family. First, Presiding Officer and First Minister, I have a constituent whose daughter is awaiting an ADHD assessment. She sees a counsellor once a week in school while awaiting an appointment with a neurodevelopmental service. They've said that they want to wait to see her when she is in primary 7, but even then there is still a 26-month waiting list. Now, this is unacceptable. So what support can be given to the health services in my Greenock and Inverclyde constituency to help reduce these waiting times?
First Minister.
As I indicated in my earlier answer to Mr Fraser, and I won't repeat all the details that I gave there, but I acknowledge the seriousness of the point that Mr McMillan puts to me on behalf of his constituent. Now, the Government's budget obviously includes substantial new investment in health boards, and in my earlier answer I indicated that we are making progress on the achievement of the CAMS performance statistics. I think that combination of early intervention, enabling us to ensure that the service can be focused on those children with the most acute needs, will help us to address the substance of the point that Mr McMillan puts to me today. And I'd be happy for the Health Secretary to address specifically the points that Mr McMillan has raised on behalf of his constituent.
Paul Sweeney.
Presiding Officer, may I add my condolences to the family and friends of our colleague Christina McKelvie. She was a kind person and a cheerful and helpful minister who often went out of her way to assist colleagues in resolving many issues that they dealt with in their constituencies. Presiding Officer, earlier this week, families and the patients attending the Notre Dame Children's Centre in Glasgow were shocked by the announced closure of the centre, which provides invaluable treatment for children who have experienced trauma through abuse, neglect or bereavement. This is unacceptable, and it is linked directly to cuts proposed by the Integrated Joint Board in Glasgow to cut psychological trauma services by 22%. Will the First Minister please give families and patients affected the reassurance that the Government will intervene in this case and not allow such a devastating cut to mental health services to take place?
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Sweeney for his kind remarks about Christina McKelvie, and he's absolutely right that she went out of her way to help members on all questions. I am concerned here about the news about the Notre Dame Centre, and I've asked government officials to liaise with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and Glasgow City Council, who obviously are the partners in the Integrated Joint Board, to address the concerns and to provide the reassurance that we all need that the demand on the services that would have been provided by Notre Dame are able to be met in the future, because it's vital that individuals who require these services are able to access them.
Question number 6, Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I would also like to add my condolences to the family, friends and colleagues of Christina McKelvie at this tragic time. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to prevent instances of water scarcity in 2025.
First Minister.
President Officer, climate change is driving more extreme weather conditions in Scotland, and this month the Scottish Environment Protection Agency reported that Scotland has had a drier than average winter. Scotland's National Water Scarcity Plan sets out how water resources will be managed during periods of prolonged dry weather. As part of that plan, the Scottish Government, SEPA and Scottish Water have established rigorous processes to monitor the situation and support those affected. Summer is normally a crucial time of the year for water demand and potentially for water shortage. It's important water users and abstractors are aware of the risk of water scarcity so that we can all help to reduce pressure on the water environment. From May, SEPA will provide weekly water scarcity reports to update key sectors and stakeholders on the position. And I thank Mercedes Vialba for her kind remarks about Christina McKelvie.
Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you. I thank the First Minister for that response, because any commitment from the Scottish Government for improved resilience to our water system is welcome, because upgrading our water infrastructure is going to be crucial to prevent water scarcity and also flash flooding and wildfires. But according to the outgoing Chief Executive of Scottish Water, it's only investing 40% of what's required to upgrade our water infrastructure, while at the same time we're seeing it become increasingly reliant on outsourcing services, maintenance and upgrades to private interests. So can I ask the First Minister whether he agrees that the people of Scotland deserve public services that reinvest profits in-house rather than outsourcing and privatising public goods by the back door? Does he support that principle?
First Minister.
I very much support the principle of water being owned in the public sector and managed in the interest of the public sector, which is exactly what Scottish Water does. And of course that's different from the water management systems, certainly in England, which are privatised and which are of poorer quality, less resilience and more expensive and not operating as firmly in the public interest as Scottish Water. So the model that Mercedes Vialba talks about is the model which I believe is in place in Scotland. There's obviously Scottish Water will procure external construction support to enhance water infrastructure, which I think we would all accept is necessary to ensure value for money for the public purse. But Scottish Water invested over £1 billion in 2023-24 and plans to invest a total of £6 billion across the current regulatory period between 21 to 27. And I can't overstate the importance of this, given the fact that we are experiencing. You answered a question last week about wildfires in March in Scotland. I just leave that sentence for Parliament to think about. Wildfires in Scotland in March. It should be significantly wetter than that in Scotland these days to cope with such circumstances. But that's an illustration of the challenges that we're facing. But I very much endorse the approach that's set out by Mercedes Vialba.
Question number 7, Ash Regan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I'd also like to extend the deep condolences from all at the Alba Party to the friends and family of Christina McKelvie at this very sad time. To ask the First Minister, in light of reports of an escalation of gang-related violence in Edinburgh, with recent shootings in Niddrie and West Pilton, what immediate action can be taken to support the emergency services in ensuring the safety and reassurance to communities in my Edinburgh Eastern constituency?
First Minister. So I'm grateful to Ash Regan for her comments on my dear colleague. And in relation to her question, I'm deeply concerned by recent incidents in Edinburgh and I'm fully supportive of Police Scotland's efforts to apprehend those responsible. While it would be inappropriate to comment on the investigation itself, I can reassure members that significant resources being put into the scrutiny of CCTV, door-to-door inquiries and increased patrols are being deployed in the area. And I would encourage anyone with information to report that directly to Police Scotland. There is, of course, a range of other measures that have been taken in relation to the work of the Serious and Organised Crime Task Force key partners to disrupt, deter and detect serious organised crime, and that remains an absolute priority for all partners.
Ash Regan.
The very serious concerns that were raised at the Scottish Police Federation conference over issues like officer burnout and under-resourcing leading to reactive policing must be urgently addressed to support our police, who in turn support our community safety. Edinburgh residents have the right to reassurance from visible, proactive policing and not to be left at the risk of being caught up in gang warfare. So will the First Minister commit today to review the allocation formula for police funding to Edinburgh and consider targeted support for policing in areas of rising gang activity?
Minister.
These issues are, of course, and those judgments are a matter for the Chief Constable in the exercise of her operational responsibility for control of policing, and it would be inappropriate for me to specify where police officers should specifically be located, other than to reassure communities that where there is intelligence that is actively scrutinised by Police Scotland to identify the potential for violence to emerge in our society, that will be responded to by Police Scotland and resources allocated accordingly. Now, of course, in the budget, the Government has allocated £1.62 billion to support police capacity and capability, which is an increase of £57 million in resource funding to enable our police to be able to undertake the roles that we expect them to undertake. And there is now capital funding in place which is assisting with the renewal of the estate, technology and fleet activities, and also investment in body-worn video camera equipment, which has been rolled out for the first area of the country in the last few days.
Webber. Thank you, Presiding Officer. These events should concentrate the minds of the Scottish Government regarding the ongoing under-resourcing of policing in the capital. 3 years ago, Edinburgh had 120 fewer officers than its population needed, and that by March last year there were 22 fewer than the year before. Can I press the First Minister? Will the Scottish Government commit to resourcing Edinburgh's police force in a manner that reflects the growing population and the additional complexities needed to police a capital city? First Minister.
Well, I give that reassurance that the Chief Constable will address these issues. The Chief Constable is responsible for the operational deployment of police officers around the country. I believe the financial settlement we've put in place for policing is adequate for the challenges that we face in our country, given the fact that we know that recorded crime is down 40% since 2006-07. And there has been a 54% fall in attempted murder and serious assault. So we have, comparatively speaking, lower levels of crime in our society, but we continue to invest in policing, and I know the Chief Constable will be very attentive to the deployment of resources effectively around the country to meet the needs of communities facing challenges.
We move to constituency and general supplementaries. I call Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I also offer my heartfelt condolences to Keith, to Jack and to Lewis on the sad and untimely passing of our friend and colleague Christina McKelvie. First Minister, you mentioned the Notre Dame Centre earlier in my constituency. They have supported young people and families with complex trauma right across Glasgow since 1931, and they now face imminent closure. It follows NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and partners pooling funding despite an outstanding record, meeting all required outcomes and with no concerns having previously raised. This appalling decision has created great anxiety and uncertainty for 100 children and their families currently being supported and those on waiting lists. This is no strategic redesign of service. That would surely have involved working with Notre Dame, not blindsiding them, and the decision must be reversed. Will the First Minister urgently meet with myself and the Notre Dame Centre to hear of our deep concerns, and will the Scottish Government, as I have done, raise their concerns directly with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and partners?
First Minister.
Those concerns have been raised with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and with the City Council, but I would of course be very happy to meet with Mr Doris on these questions. I understand his long-standing connection with the Notre Dame Centre and his appreciation of their work, and I'd be happy to meet with him and with the Centre to hear the concerns that have been raised in Parliament today.
Thank you. Jackson Carlow.
Thank you. Presiding officer, I've been appalled in the last few weeks at an unprecedented series of attacks, sectarian attacks targeted on St Joseph's Primary School in Busby in my Eastwood constituency. The buildings have been sprayed with offensive and sectarian discriminatory graffiti. The outdoor play area was set on fire, and there was a further arson attack on a children's area just this last weekend. The school community have been left stupefied and naturally distressed, but I do want to pay tribute to Police Scotland and East Renfrewshire Council for the decisive way in which they have intervened to seek to make the community feel safe. Just earlier this month, St Joseph's received a glowing report from Education Scotland for the exemplary standard of education the school is showing. First Minister, today of all days, when all of us here are reminded that we live, learn, work and play together, will the First Minister join me in offering a show of solidarity to the community in St Joseph's and make clear that here in Scotland, faith will not be used as a force for division, but that together all faiths and those of none must work and come together in order to create the community in which we all want Scotland to live.
First Minister.
Not for the first time in my life, I find myself in huge agreement with Mr Carlow on the comments that he makes. I appreciate the way in which he has expressed this point, and I think the contrast of the material that Mr Carlow has put on the record could not make his point more strongly between the contents of the school, which have been acknowledged by Education Scotland and His Majesty's Inspector of Education to be outstanding, and the outside of the school, where the school is targeted with completely and utterly unacceptable behaviour, which never had any place in Scottish society, and it certainly doesn't have any place in Scottish society in 2025. So, I endorse entirely Mr Carlow's comments, and perhaps maybe the best way through this is for Mr Carlow and I to visit St Joseph's School, and we could perhaps have a Q&A session and see how we both get on at the school in front of the pupils. But it would be an indication of my warm appreciation of the strength of the school and what it does for the children of that community.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'd like to start by saying today thank you to Christina McKelvie for the warmth and kindness that she showed me as a newbie in this Parliament in the early days of myself in this place. I'll be forever grateful for her kindness and warmth, and I'd like to add my condolences to that of others, to Keith Brown, to Christina and to all those who loved her. Presiding Officer, Glasgow's Integration Joint Board is planning to axe its supported living service. It's used by nearly 40 people across the city, including people living with dementia, as part of efforts to plug the £42.5 million funding gap. The decision will reportedly save £2.8 million, but staff have warned that mainstream provision simply won't meet the complex needs of those affected. One woman said she will no longer be able to live the life she has now if the support is taken away. So can I ask the First Minister, will he step in and help protect this vital service to ensure that those who rely on it are not abandoned?
First Minister.
So in the recent budget that Parliament passed, the Government did two things which I think potentially helped to address the issues that Pam Duncan-Glancy put to me. Firstly, we increased the NHS budget, or the Health and Social Care budget, I should say, to over £21 billion to ensure that there was an uplift that would enable investment in local services. And we also delivered a real terms increase in local authority funding for core services to enable local authorities, who are the other contributors to integrated joint boards. Now, clearly, I've had two questions today, one from Mr Doris and Mr Sweeney on Notre Dame, and the second question from Ms Duncan-Glancy in relation to the care at home service, both of which are about the integrated joint board in Glasgow. So I think there will be a need for a wider conversation between the Government and the integrated joint board to address these concerns that have been properly put to me by members today.
And Oliver Mundell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I associate myself with all of the tributes that have been made to Christina McKelvie I know how deeply she'll be missed, and my thoughts and prayers are with Keith Brown and her whole family. Yesterday, community councils across my constituency received a notification from Police Scotland that officers will no longer attend their meetings, given the rising and competing demands and challenges on policing. This move will negatively impact local democracy, and worryingly, this decision has been taken without any community consultation. It follows a similar move which saw local event organisers told that long-standing police involvement in community events was no longer guaranteed due to pressure on police resources. Does the First Minister share my concern that vital links between the police and the communities they serve are being eroded under the Police Scotland model, and does he recognise that the imposition of a Police Scotland central belt policing culture is increasingly damaging public confidence and the good work of dedicated local police officers?
First Minister.
I stress the importance in all of this of there being effective dialogue between Police Scotland and local communities, because it's only through that dialogue will we establish, or it's one channel to establish, an understanding and awareness of some of the challenges that exist in local areas. And I think I would hope Mr Mundell and I could agree that that doesn't necessarily have to always be through attendance at community council meetings, because there's a lot of community councils across Scotland. But what there has to be is there has to be good, engaged local dialogue, which I know will take place with the local authority in Dumfries and Galloway, but which has to be satisfactory in making sure there is an awareness amongst Police Scotland about the issues and aspirations that will exist in local areas. But I will seek the view of the Chief Constable on this point and write to Mr Mundell with further details.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a members' business debate in the name of Liz Smith, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and public gallery to do so.